I leaned back in my leather chair, letting the sunlight splash across the glass walls of my corner office. The city sprawled beneath me like a glittering ocean, the hum of traffic a soft reminder that I was no longer small, no longer overlooked. My fingers brushed over the silk of my blouse, and for a moment, I let myself feel the satisfaction of being exactly where I belonged. Then my phone buzzed on the polished oak desk, breaking the calm. I glanced down, a message from an old colleague, one of the people who'd taken my first desk years ago. "Heard you're finally running things. Congrats." A laugh bubbled out of me, soft and ironic. They thought they dimmed me, pushed me to the corner. Yet here I was, in the tower that rose above their world, a world that once laughed when I dared to speak. I could almost feel that small, cramped desk they'd forced me to share, the way it had smelled of cheap laminate and disappointment. I stood, moving to the window. My reflection merged with the skyline, a reminder that the girl they tried to crush had survived, and more than survived, she had built an empire in silence. That message, harmless to them, was a spark for me. I touched the engraved nameplate on my desk, not mine in those early days, but now mine by every measure. They took my desk, now I own the office tower. I remember the first time they took it from me, my little corner of the office that felt like home. I was 23, fresh out of college, brimming with ideas that no one seemed to want to hear. My desk, the one I'd decorated with a tiny potted succulent and a photo of my grandmother, had been my sanctuary. But the promotion came, not to me, of course, but to someone else who had arrived later, smiled brighter, and knew how to play the game. The day it happened, I was sitting there, trying to organize my notes, when my boss's assistant appeared. "Samantha, you'll need to move your things to the bullpen. They've decided to repurpose your desk."
Just like that.
My hands froze over my keyboard, and I felt the familiar sting of disbelief curling in my chest. I couldn't speak. I barely nodded. Later, in the empty hallway, I sank to the floor, tracing the laminate with my fingertips as though I could memorize the space they had stolen from me. I remembered my grandmother's words, whispered when she noticed my tears during a family dinner. "They can take a desk, Sam, but they can never take what you carry inside. One day they'll see it, too." I clutched the tiny charm she'd given me, a silver key engraved with a single word, "Rise." It felt heavy with possibility in my palm. I left that office that day with a knot in my throat, but also with a decision hardening in my chest. No one would define my worth. No one would dictate my path. I would learn. I would grow. I would return, stronger, smarter, unstoppable. And so began the long, quiet rebellion. The nights of researching markets, of sketching business plans on napkins, of sending proposals into voids that sometimes answered with rejection, sometimes with opportunity. Each step was a small victory, each setback a lesson. I hid the fire in my eyes, letting the world believe I was fragile, compliant, powerless. But the key was always in my pocket, a reminder that my real desk, my real throne, was yet to be claimed. After that day, I disappeared into a world that no one noticed. Nights were long, stretching into the quiet hours when the city slept, and I worked under the dim light of a desk lamp in my tiny apartment. I learned to code, to pitch, to negotiate, to survive in a space that seemed designed to crush anyone who dared to dream. Each rejection letter, each cold email, each investor who dismissed me only strengthened my resolve. Then, one evening, I met Claire Donovan, a seasoned entrepreneur who had built her own company from scratch. She saw something in me that no one else had, raw determination, a mind hungry for growth. "Samantha," she said over coffee, steam curling between us, "you don't need anyone to hand you a seat. Build your own table." And that was the spark I needed. The months that followed were relentless. I pitched to small clients first, barely scraping together enough revenue to pay rent. I wore worn-out shoes, brewed my own coffee, and counted every dollar. There were moments when I thought of quitting, when my hands shook with exhaustion, when my confidence faltered, when the loneliness pressed down like a heavy fog. But the silver key in my pocket reminded me of my grandmother's words, "Rise." And rise I did. First came my small victories: a contract with a boutique design firm, a glowing referral, a client who trusted me when no one else would. Then, bigger wins followed: a partnership with a regional company, a strategic investment, my first profitable quarter. Slowly, silently, I began to build the foundation for something greater. I kept my success hidden, crafting a modest online presence while secretly amassing resources, hiring brilliant minds, and investing in ventures that would one day form an empire. My old colleagues and family believed I was struggling, that I had vanished into obscurity. They had no idea that the girl they dismissed, the one who had once been moved to a corner desk, was quietly building the tower they would someday have to look up to. I decorated my first office, a space that was mine, truly mine, with small tokens of my journey: the silver key on my desk, a framed photo of my grandmother, a miniature succulent that reminded me of that first desk I'd lost. Every detail whispered my story, my struggle, my triumph, even when no one else could read it yet. By the time I was ready to step into the world fully, I had not only reclaimed my space but expanded it. My empire grew in silence, my confidence sharpened, and my patience taught me a vital lesson: power taken quietly is power unshakable. The day they arrived, I let them believe I was the same person they had underestimated all those years ago. The conference room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished oak, a subtle contrast to the sterile cubicles they remembered. I had invited them under the pretense of a meeting about a potential collaboration, but in truth, this was my moment. They walked in, heads held high with superiority, smirks barely hiding the faint unease in their eyes. I gestured for them to take a seat, my voice calm, smooth, the slight warmth in my tone lulling them into familiarity. "Please," I said, "make yourselves comfortable." Their eyes wandered around the office, lingering on the details that subtly announced my rise: the panoramic windows showcasing the city skyline, the elegant modern art curated from local artists, the thick leather chairs that spoke of comfort earned, not handed. Claire Donovan's silver key rested discreetly in a glass frame on my desk, almost invisible, yet resonant, with a story of resilience. For a long moment, I let the silence speak. Their shifting glances and whispered comments betrayed disbelief. "I didn't realize," one of them began, faltering. I smiled, letting the truth hang in the air. "No, you didn't," I said softly, each word deliberate. "You thought you could take my desk, sideline me, and that I would disappear. You underestimated what I carry inside." I walked to the window, hands resting lightly on the ledge, letting the cityscape reflect back my power. "This isn't just an office," I continued, turning slowly to face them. "This tower, these companies, they're mine. Every deal, every investment, every step of growth built quietly, patiently, while the world looked the other way." Their mouths moved, searching for words, but none came. I could see the shame, the guilt, the disbelief curling like smoke in the corners of the room. I let them take it all in, observing their reactions with the satisfaction of someone who had waited years for this moment. "I own the companies that once hired you, the contracts that you once managed, the decisions you thought you controlled," I said, letting each phrase sink. My voice was calm but firm, compassionate yet unyielding. And I did it without breaking my principles, without losing my integrity. Unlike the world you left me in, I built something lasting, something real. The air was thick with tension. Their faces mirrored shock, a hint of envy, and the dawning realization that the girl they had dismissed as weak, naive, or powerless had become something unstoppable. I gestured toward my desk. The silver key, my grandmother's mantra, my little succulent, each detail a testament to the journey they never saw. "You may have taken my desk," I said, a soft laugh escaping me, "but I built the tower above yours. And now we can either work together or you can step aside. The choice is yours." For the first time, I saw humility in their eyes. And I knew the moment of confrontation had become a moment of triumph. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had reclaimed my power in its purest form, undeniable, elegant, and unapologetically mine. I stood behind my desk, letting my gaze sweep over them, calm and steady. The roles had reversed. They were no longer the ones with authority. I was. And now came the hardest part, deciding how to wield it. I can help each of you. I began, my voice measured, but only if you're willing to change. Not for me, but for yourselves. This isn't about punishment, it's about growth. I looked first at David, the manager who had reassigned my desk years ago. You need to stop controlling through fear, I said softly. Lead with respect, not intimidation. Mentor your team instead of sidelining talent. I'll give you that opportunity, but only if you commit to it genuinely. Next was Karen, my former colleague who had once whispered lies about me to the board. Transparency, I told her, is everything. No more half-truths, no more undermining others for personal gain. You'll attend leadership coaching sessions before taking any major role in my companies. Her lips pressed together. I could see she understood the gravity of her choice. Finally, my family, my younger brother, who had once mocked my ambitions. I held his gaze steadily. I will support your dreams, I said, but not if they rely on diminishing others. You will pursue work that challenges you and contributes positively, or you step aside. I love you, but love isn't an excuse for old habits. I could see the shift in the room. The tension softened, replaced by a mix of awe, guilt, and cautious hope. This wasn't simply about asserting power, it was about setting boundaries that would protect the growth I had fought so hard for. I allowed a small smile, a flicker of warmth, to show. I am not here to crush you, I said. I am here to elevate everyone who is willing to rise. The people who stay stagnant, who repeat toxic patterns, will not find a place in my tower. Those who grow, who embrace the principles of respect, diligence, and integrity, they will thrive alongside me. As I spoke, I noticed the small details, the soft clatter of a pen, the hesitant shifting in chairs, the subtle nods. They were listening. For once, they weren't dismissing me. They were absorbing the weight of what it meant to finally recognize someone's worth, not just in words, but in action. I concluded firmly, the past is gone. The desk you took doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what we do from here. Everyone has a choice. And my choice is clear. I lead with integrity, I expect growth, and I protect what I've built, my empire, my values, and myself. For the first time in years, I felt the room align with my energy. The power shift wasn't just symbolic. It was transformative. And I knew that by holding the line with compassion and firmness, I wasn't just reshaping my world, I was shaping theirs too. Weeks passed, and change began to ripple through the people I had set conditions for. David started mentoring his team with genuine care, his once sharp commands softened into guidance. Karen learned to communicate honestly, her whispers replaced with clarity and collaboration. Even my brother, hesitant at first, found a path that challenged him and made him accountable. Watching them grow, I felt no triumphal glee, only quiet satisfaction that my hard-won power was now creating positive change. I often sat in my office after the workday ended, gazing out at the city skyline as the lights flickered on one by one. The silver key on my desk caught the golden glow of the sunset, reminding me of the journey that began with a stolen desk and a promise whispered by my grandmother, "Rise." I traced its surface with my fingers, a symbol of resilience, patience, and ultimate triumph. I reflected on the years it took to build this life, the nights spent doubting myself, the moments of despair when rejection seemed endless, the silent victories no one witnessed. I realized that the woman I had become wasn't just defined by wealth or ownership of towers, but by the integrity, patience, and resilience that had carried me here. Every setback had been a lesson, every obstacle a stepping stone.
And yet, it wasn't only about me.
It was about the people I chose to guide, the boundaries I enforced, and the relationships I nurtured. Power without empathy, I had learned, was hollow. But power paired with clarity, courage, and compassion became transformative, not just for me, but for everyone around me. I leaned back in my chair, inhaling the familiar scent of polished wood and fresh coffee, smiling at the subtle clatter of my team finishing the day's work. I was no longer the girl who had lost her desk, underestimated, and overlooked. I was Samantha Hayes, a woman who had taken control, risen above every challenge, and shaped her world on her terms. And in that quiet, powerful moment, I whispered to myself, a mantra that had guided me from the start. They took my desk, but I own the tower now.